Shanthitown, 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 Shanthitown.
Thanks for coming around to the Shanthitown. It's good to be here, finally. Why do I say finally? Because it's taken us a long time to get this started, even though we talked about it quite a long time ago. Right?
Yes, it's been a long time coming.
Long time. You know, we live in Japan, in Kyushu, Japan, where it's very difficult sometimes to connect with our mother tongue. Japan is a cultural hegemony where there's only about 2% or 3% non-Japanese people in the whole country. And we're in the countryside of Japan. And for some years, I've been living here and working on our yoga school and developing our yoga ashram. And I was always surrounded by Japanese women because the yoga market in Japan is mostly for women. And I was always missing a brother. So when I met you that day at the ashram, I was like, first thing I said, we should make a podcast.
Yeah, I think you said that the first day we met.
First day we met, I was like,
you're already on the podcast.
Yeah, I was already on it because I knew I wanted to do, and I was looking for someone who could be steady and open to do so. And so that's why we're here. And we want to include many people, but the other people are coming and going. And we need to set up a good background, or we need to set up a good song, or we need to set up everything. And if you're always trying to make things perfect and set it up ideal, if this is in place and this is in place and this is in place, then I'm ready. Nothing will ever happen. Because actually everything is constantly in flux, constantly changing. And no matter what it is, we're never really ready. But, you know, the great thing about the human organism is our main feature, the main thing that helps us survive is our adaptability. Yeah, which is,
Yeah, that's a good point. That, what is it? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good or something, is that saying.
Yeah.
So we're just starting.
Just doing.
We're just starting it here. So this is the Shanthitown podcast.
Shanthitown.
And this is Waylon.
I'm Waylon.
Waylon Belding.
Waylon Andrew Bernard Belding, as per the birth certificate.
Okay. We're getting very formal here.
Very formal. 4 names.
Wait.
Very difficult in Japan when everybody has 2 names. And I have to fill out everything.
You say Andrew?
Andrew. Waylon Andrew Bernard Belding. WAB.
Bernard Belding.
Yeah. My mother.
Seth Andrew Baldozer. I didn't even know. We're Andrew brothers.
We're Andrew brothers. Our middle names are Andrew. Wow.
Okay. And
something we found out.
Yeah. So why is it called Shantytown?
Well, like we said, Shanti, it means a few things, right? In Sanskrit, which is my favorite language, even though I'm not very good at it, Shanti means peace. And Peace Town, very good. We are working on making our yoga dojo in our community, which is kind of a peace town, but it's also a shanty town, like the English.
Yeah.
Especially from, does it come from Jamaica?
I think so. When I think Shantytown, I think of Jamaica or Brazil maybe, or something where all these little lean-to houses made out of metal or whatever you can find.
Tin roofs.
And it's very informal, very kind of what's the word? Bohemian. I don't know about Bohemian, but
just Bohemian is technically Eastern European.
Yeah,
right?
true. Maybe
but we can say it's a temporary town that springs up out of nowhere.
Yeah. And that's really what's happening at the Sri Ashram.
Yeah, Sri Ashram in Kumamoto, Japan. This is where we are constructing very slowly the whole operation. And twice a year, we set up a month-long camp where everybody comes in camps, and it becomes a shanty town. Yeah. And we practice every day in the early morning, and then we share chai, and we go work all day, having good food. And we also have yoga philosophy, Bhagavad Gita lessons. We do kirtan, dancing and singing. And then we do proper Japanese, proper style. We go to the onsen, enjoy the hot spring at the end of the day.
Everything you need there. Yeah, so the podcast name, Shantytown, references both the peace of Shanti, Shantihi, right, to pronounce it correctly, and also the fact that at the ashram in Wayland's community that he's kind of the nucleus of is sort of an informal Shantytowners gathering of all these people attracted to the yoga lifestyle, the Vedic culture, the Vedic philosophy, permaculture, all these things coming together.
Yep.
And so this podcast, maybe we should talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about all these things of yoga and Vedic philosophy, spiritual topics, conspiracy, because Waylon and I are both into, conspiracy, which really I think is just more about truth that is hidden.
I think anybody that spends time on the internet eventually finds the conspiracy rabbit hole, and many jump in, many
drown.
Many drown. Many become possessed by the spirits inside. And many just totally don't even go in. They just walk by.
Yeah, they're afraid of it. They won't even dip their toe in because it's scary. It's scary to think that maybe everything you've been taught is a lie. But
well, yeah, I mean, everything from one perspective is like a lie. I can think of many situations in my life. For example, I spent many years traveling. And one of the things I learned my very first time traveling, when I first left my nest, my comfort zone, my little bubble in Canada, and my very first time I flew to outside of the country, except for the few trips to your country, the neighbor, America, going outside overseas, I noticed, wow, the world is not so organized. Things are not the way that I was taught. Just because things were like that in my little place, it's totally different everywhere, and things don't seem to be happening the way that I thought they would happen. So that's when I started to realize that all of the stories that were told about society, about humanity, about even the way we run anything, it's not what we think it is.
Yeah. And it's all about we're taught all these narratives as kids in school, from our parents, from the culture and the society. And then, as you grow up, hopefully you realize that those aren't really accurate, or they're only partially correct. And especially in recent years, I think conspiracies are becoming mainstream. Like, when I first started getting into conspiracies, 10, 15 years ago or something, it was still very much like underground. But now, with COVID, I don't know, with recent events, it's more like conspiracy theories are becoming mainstream in many ways. And people say a conspiracy theory is now a spoiler alert because it comes true 6 months later. In 2020, it was a conspiracy that COVID came from a lab and didn't come from people eating bats in China or something.
Yeah.
So, people are saying conspiracy theories are now a spoiler alert.
Yeah, and you can, you take that even further. If you look at when you talk about spirituality and yoga, all of reality is Maya, we say, is an illusion, or is not so much that it's not something that's tangible, but rather because of its temporary nature, it is just an appearance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that appearance is not at all what we think it is. So, I mean, if you go through the substrate of consciousness and its interaction with matter and reality, this is a big topic.
Yeah. Reality itself is a conspiracy theory,
It's a conspiracy,
the great illusion. And also that if you look at the etymology of the word conspiracy, it means comes from conspire, which means to breathe together. So you could get into, the idea that God or the Creator breathed life into creation, and it's all this is all conspiracy now. It's all breathing together.
Yeah. The Vedas say that the Maya, the material reality, is programmed. Its chief program is bewilderment, to confuse the people. Not because God wants to confuse us, but He wants to find out how much love we really have, and to see where we put our attention and what we're actually putting our love and worship into. So, such it is His life. This is why I focus on yoga so much in my life. Practice and the teaching and sharing the teachings and creating the community. It's like not really making a society or making a religion or making a group. It's just ringing a bell and seeing who comes, seeing who wakes up, and who comes around and does some things together.
Nice, yeah. In a way, your ashram is a conspiracy. It's people working together to build something, to do something. It's not in secret, really.
No, it's not in secret, and it's kind of a culture, right? Anybody, like, there's a school culture, right? There's a government culture. There's a people go to the gym. There's a gym culture. People go, and the traffic, driving in the car. There's a traffic culture. You go to the mall. There's a mall culture. People don't just walk around naked in the mall. You have to dress a certain way. You go there. You bring the product here. You give money here. There's a code of conduct. So the yoga culture is the same way. Yes. In Japan, it's very interesting. We're both in Japan, and it's not always easy as foreigners to be Japanese, but especially with yoga, there's always the idea of the cult. People always bring up, because Japanese people, historically, especially with the Om Shinriko cult, the big Om cult that came, they're very hesitant to not only like understand, but they're hesitant to accept that someone is doing something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like they've been burned collectively by this bad experience with some guru figure.
Yeah,
who started a group, and then they tried to murder people. Or they did murder people, I think. And now
he murdered people.
The collective consciousness of Japan is very sensitive about guru type figures, especially older people. I think younger people, it's not so.
But that even goes back to World War II, because when Japanese was in their fervor of war, they all believed the emperor was God, and that was kind of a big culture. It was a big religion, and they all, because of that fanatical belief, they had the first suicide bombers, the very first really like organized military operation. Maybe not the first actually, but at least very, very powerful. And I think all of these things, including the Om cult, all of these things, they leave a mark on a people's collective consciousness. And so they become hesitant to go down that road again. Every time we've gone down that road, like you said, we've been burned.
Yeah, it's interesting how cultures maybe have like a karma or just like a individual human being has things that they're working through in their life that they struggle with. And as Westerners, we often see Japan, and we see that they're very more collectivist than in the West, where it's more individualist.
Yes.
And so, like you say, like following their government in World War II, or following some people who followed this Om Shinriko, maybe this is something that Japanese people need to learn as a collective, is to be a little bit more individualistic and not blindly follow who you think is, a god or a government, which is something I think everybody around the world needs to learn, not just Japanese people. But
yeah, well, even in the West, we need to learn to be more collectivist.
Yeah, we need a little bit more. We could learn from Japan and Asian countries to be more. Because
Japan, you can leave your car with the keys in the ignition, in the parking lot, with all the windows open. Nobody will steal anything. No one will take the car. No one will do anything. You do that in my country. You do that in your country. You do that in most countries in the world. Not all. I know there are certain places in the Middle East that'll never happen. But most countries, that car is either everything inside is stolen, or the car itself is stolen, or the thing is stripped and taken apart. There's so many different variations. But in Japan, your objects are safe. Also, you are very safe. There's no danger that you're going to be shot. It's very rare. Gun violence here is very small. It basically doesn't happen. Violence against property basically doesn't happen. And of course it does. There's always some variation there. But if you look at the actual numbers, the statistics, it's very, very low. Lowest in the world, I think, probably here. So there's something very special there. And that can only happen because, again, it has 97%. Everybody's following the same. Everybody's marching to the same beat, the same rhythm.
Which, of course, there's positives and negatives to that, because sometimes people feel Japan is a little bit too confining, because there's a lot of pressure from the society to conform and to follow the rules. And
how many foreigners have you known that have got frustrated with that and left? my experience being here. A lot of people can't take it.
So it's just like with anything. There's positives and negatives to anything. Like,
Yes,
You know. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's interesting.
It's interesting.
So
that's part of the reason why in this place where it's very culturally the same tone and like this, why I was to live here. If I'm going to live here with my family, my wife's Japanese, of course. That's also why you're here. Your wife is Japanese. If I'm going to live here, I have to fully enjoy my life and not feel restricted. Unfortunately, due to my Western upbringing, it's very difficult to be in a cultural, monotonous place in the countryside of Japan. So that's why I decided to expand the yoga school to make this ashram that we're doing, which is if I'm going to live in this different culture here, I'm going to make a little bubble and see if anybody wants to come. Be inside the bubble and make this bubble really rich. And so up at the ashram, there are many Japanese people that come by. They drive by randomly because it's on a road, and sometimes people just turn there and they're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm in Japan anymore.
they took a wrong turn in Albuquerque.
They took a wrong turn in Albuquerque. And then
Bugs Bunny.
yeah.
Anyway,
It's a Bugs Bunny. Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know if you're old enough or young enough or whatever.
Oh, I love Bugs Bunny.
Sure.
I love Bugs Bunny. Merry Melodies. I took a wrong turn, and suddenly, some people run away immediately. They get there and they're like, oh my God, too much. Got to go back to what I know. But many people are attracted to it, and you and many others have decided to do some construction and to build something, and to try to make something. And I think it's really important. Like this idea of the Shantytown is that everybody comes together and they make a community, a temporary community, or most Shantytowns probably become permanent communities. But in this world, especially with the brainwashing of economics and capitalism, it kind of forces everybody into their own individual compartment. And I think that for us to actually make something beautiful and to make a good impact on the world, we need to work together.
Yeah. And that's the other key part of what you're doing. We talked about the yoga, the spirituality, we'll talk about conspiracies on this show, the community and that you said building a culture, building a community, and tied in with permaculture, right? Because you're really working with the land there, trying to, regenerate the soil, which was depleted by the neighbors who were growing mikans, which is a tangerine.
Satsuma, the small orange.
I mean, in English you would call it
Mandarin.
tangerine or
We
mandarin.
say mandarin oranges usually.
Yeah.
They're so tasty. Everybody in Christmas time, at least I don't know about in Canada, we usually got the big boxes of mandarin oranges in Christmas time, and you just eat them all in one sitting. They're so good. So I loved them my whole life. I've been a devotee of the mandarin orange. And now I'm living in a mountain, basically, where they're abundant. They're falling off the trees onto the road. So good.
Yeah, but a lot of the farmers around there have not used very sustainable practices, and they've used pesticides and things to deplete, and then the soil's depleted. So a lot of what you're doing is working with the land there, and you're planting a bunch of fruit trees, doing a lot of landscaping. We
planted 70 trees, including mikans, mandarin oranges, dekopong, navel oranges, king khan, which is like the small little oranges. We've got pears, mulberry, lots of mulberry trees. Mulberry seem to do the best. Also kaki, which is the persimmon. We have pecan, we have almond, we have walnut, we have plums, sour plums, peaches. It's going to take some years before these trees are mature and fruiting well, but I've got over 70 trees planted there now. And I'm still a beginner, trying to learn how to do it all. But I was, again, how much training do I need to get before I'm ready? Just start doing it, make the mistakes, and try your best to scramble to recover.
I mean, connected to your whole ashram and everything, it's just like chaos, It's a very creative chaos. It's a very... Everything's happening at once, but it's moving along very well. So.
We're making good progress, and we're approaching the end of our first structure, which is it's a 6-meter tall earth bag structure. I call it like a kamidana in Japan. A kamidana is like a place for the worship of the kami-sama god. It's a 4.5-meter dome, 6 meters tall, and it's earth bag, which is a very labor-intensive way of constructing. We've spent probably 52 or 53 days total, but it's been spread over 3 years. We started very slow, just 10 days. Everybody comes, works a bit, takes a break, big break. So I've mostly been developing the farm, but now we're approaching the end of it, and slowly more people coming, and more attention is there, more money is getting donated, and then we have lots of support structures to do. We have a outdoor kitchen and a deck, and we have like an earth oven there now, and very beautiful earth oven. I think one of the most beautiful ones in the whole world, fully tiled in the shape of a turtle based on the Kurma avatar.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
That was Honey's project, right?
Honey's project, but everybody worked together
I
with
mean,
it.
yeah, but he was kind of the leader.
He was the leader of that one.
But yeah, a lot of people worked on it.
We got a green roof there, and we have a little workshop area with a shed, and it's coming together.
It's really coming together.
It's a big learning experience for me. There's so many lessons because I have no experience with construction. I had no experience with farming. Before I started this, I was just a traveling yoga teacher. I had nothing. I had renounced. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have a cell phone for 15 years. I was just traveling by myself with a backpack, traveling the world, going from country to country, teaching, trying to get some cash together here and there, trying to work my best. And slowly, year after year, it has improved and improved and improved. When I met my wife in Shanghai, this is when things started really coming together. And then we traveled together, and then eventually we ended up here in the COVID time.
How did you decide, you had been traveling around so much, how did you decide, like, okay, now I'm going to, put roots down, so to speak, and start building an ashram? Like, how
again, I really don't, for myself, like for sure my wife, she's very organized and she likes to plan, but for myself, I don't. Same with this podcast, we just kind of try. Just throw at it. So in the same way for myself, I wanted to go certain places. There was an idea to live in Hawaii at one point and live here and live there, but she really wanted to be close to her family. So we ended up here. When COVID came, all of our travel plans shut down. So that forced me to focus in one spot because I had been spending 15, 16, 17 years just traveling so much. Too much, actually. All that Rajasic energy was definitely disturbing to the mind, and you can't get anything together. You can't really dig a well if you're always moving, So then it forced me to really focus on the land here. And so before that point, it was just a big bamboo forest, and I single-handedly took every bamboo tree down. Not the nice big bamboo, by the way. It's all this small little bamboo that doesn't have a lot of use other than it's good firewood.
Yeah, your nickname is Bamboo Assassin, right?
Bamboo Killer.
Bamboo Killer. Yeah.
That's my song, Bamboo Killer.
You've killed so many bamboo in your day.
Well, technically, it's only one big bamboo.
Oh, yeah? It's
right?
all connected into
I'm
one?
pretty sure that it's one massive root structure.
It's like a hydra,
Yeah, like a hydra. Exactly. Well, no, it's exactly. You cut down one and then three more come up. It's exactly like a hydra. But yeah, it was just a bamboo forest. And I didn't kill the forest. I just took out a section of it.
Yeah.
I just took out a section of it. And then we had to take, the hardest part is the roots getting into the earth. And then you start to see the interconnectedness. You look at it from the outside, it looks like just a whole bunch of individual things. But when you get down, you dig under the surface, you see that every single part is totally connected together. And it's the same thing with all humans in the same way, where we look from the outside, superficially, as complete individuals. And we are. In the same way, every bamboo tree is individual. Different size, they all grow a different way. But down underneath the substrate of what it actually is, it's all interconnected by one continuous consciousness, right? So this is why there have been religions and stuff. They talk about God. There must be some consciousness which intertwines all of us together. So like the bamboo, so it is for the people. Inside of the hearts of every person, I really believe there's a thread that goes through it, everybody. And that's what the yoga practice is all about, trying to understand that.
Yeah, so connected with the ashram is, you have your yoga school, which is primarily, I guess, online. Since COVID, you moved online, right?
Since COVID, yeah, it's funny. Before COVID, I was totally against being online. I love teaching with people. And so, yeah, my daily classes now are basically online. And actually, it's very nice, I think, for me and for my students, too, because we don't have to go anywhere. I just wake up, I do all my things in my house, and then I sit just beside this place here, and I can do my practice, and then they don't need to go anywhere. They can just do their morning routine and then start their practice, and we can start together. And then, we start at 4:30 a.m. with our meditation. We do 5 a.m. into pranayama. Then we do 6. We do chanting and stuff throughout, of course, appropriate mantras in appropriate timing. And then we start the asanas. We try to end by about 7:30. I'm always a little late.
Yeah, you always go a little long. Give people their value.
Yeah, give their value. Nobody ever complained to me for lack of content.
Yeah. And like, how many people are joining on average?
It totally fluctuates. And then I have my regular students, and then I have people that come and go, and then I have people that are like, all sorts of timings, But it ranges. But I try to, I'm not so much into having like a million people join. I really do like the Zoom interface because you can see the people, and you can actually have feedback with each other.
Yeah, you do a good job of even though you've got all these different students, you're like giving people feedback, and you're doing it in Japanese also, which is another whole other good skill you're developing.
Yeah, the Japanese is good, and that's also why I wanted to do this English podcast, is because most of what I'm doing with people is in Japanese, and even when I'm doing my philosophy, which I can't really do in Japanese, I have my translator. It still has a medium of Japanese, so. I want to do more English with it, but because I'm in Japan and I love the live teaching, the timing is not right. Like if I'm doing a 4:30 a.m. meditation practice in Japan, it's like evening, or in Canada where a lot of my original students are. And it's not, the timings don't really work for proper yoga practice. So anyway, I'm starting an English class soon. Stay tuned. But in the right timing for them. But it's good. Yeah, different languages are really good. Your Japanese slowly improving, maybe. But for me too, maybe. But I think it's really good for us to learn different languages. Communication
stretches the brain, and you're studying a lot of Sanskrit, right?
Try my best to improve the Sanskrit every day, reading in Sanskrit a little bit. Yeah,
which that's another thing when I look at this community and your teaching and just you as a person, the Indian influence is so strong, the Vedic thing. So I wonder, why do you think you were so attracted to this Indian? There's so many branches of spirituality, right?
Oh yes.
Why? What is it about the Indian, or how did you get into that whole?
Well, when I was young, of course I was raised in Christian culture. So when I was young, I remember going to church and stuff and doing all these things. Typical Canadian, white Canadian maybe. Even though I am quarter Japanese, I met my guru, my teacher, Indian teacher, quite young, 17 years old, 18 years old. So his influence, he left a very profound impression on me. The idea with yoga and anything, maybe you're in business, maybe you're a criminal, maybe you're a musician. If you meet someone who's really, really great at it, they'll leave an impression on you. They'll teach you something amazing, and you'll try to model your own skill and talent. You try to model yourself after them in some way, right? So because of that, he's an Indian man, old Indian man. He left his impression on me, and I just practicing and meditating, and because it was, because it's a yoga method. It's connected to Indian culture. And I was never really into it so much early. I got into sitar pretty young when I first went to India. But slowly that cultural part just expanded because I realized that the Indian culture, of course, is based around the spirituality. And the things they do, it's not just because they're Indian. They're doing things which are about relating to the science of yoga, the science of spirituality. Yeah. So traditionally, for example, in India, they usually do rites in the river every morning, right? They get a cold splash of water every morning, and they do their rites there. So having a cold shower in the morning is directly connected to yoga practice. So nowadays, in the modern health movements and stuff, cold exposure, cold baths, ice baths, all these things, it's very popular on the internet. But this is something that and even there's Wim Hof, right?
Yeah.
But this is a practice which has existed a long time ago. Like Lord Shiva, who taught yoga, he was in the Himalaya. He's naked in the Himalaya. And they're always teaching how to wash yourself. So for sure he was washing himself in a cold mountain stream. So cold exposure has always been inside of that. So, but then it takes on a cultural uniform. It takes on a cultural clothing, but it's based on a practice which is about the science of spirituality, how to maximize the potential of the physical body, and how to sharpen the mental faculties, and then to open up the experience of spirituality inside.
Yeah, when I look at Indian, the yoga, the whole Indian philosophy, it's just like, for whatever reason, in India they have this ancient, very deep spiritual science, you know, that's probably deeper than any other culture. And who knows why that was, you know, whether there's something in the soil or the water there in India, or, you know, but, and it's this long tradition. It's been maybe unbroken for however thousands of years.
Well, this will go into a little bit. He was mentioning before Graham Hancock having a new special on Netflix about ancient archaeology. And he always talks about the catastrophe. And, you know, if a big catastrophe happens and a big flood happens, where do you go?
Mountain.
You go to the mountain. And where's the biggest mountain to go?
Himalayas.
So, and even in the story of Matsya Avatar, they talk about how the rishis from the old generation, they were on the boat, like Noah's Ark. Same kind of story as Noah's Ark.
Oh, yeah. That story's present, all over the world.
Yeah, you and I both know that story exists in at least 156 different cultures or something like this. There's always variations in the telling. So it means that there was some surviving element. There was some kind of story that was passed on. And they knew something happened. And so, maybe that's why, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's other ancient, you know, paths, like there's the Sumerian and ancient Chinese and the Taoist, and, you know, there's some Western ones in the Kabbalah and things like that. But the Indian one is so extensive. It's just like they've studied everything. They've explored everything. They have these voluminous books on every subject
topic,
and every topic, and, you know, you've really dove into that for, I don't know how many years you've been.
The better part of my life, basically. You know, now today is my birthday, 41 years old, and I started at basically 17, like I said. So that's like 24 years. And so I've spent more years doing this than not at this point. And, you know, they say it's geography. Because of the Himalayas and the ocean and the mountain regions all around India, it gave them insulation and protection from outside forces for a long, 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 long time. And that allowed for them to develop that.
And they also had a fairly wealthy culture at some time. Like, people were comfortable, right? They weren't struggling to survive.
For most of human history, India has been the most opulent place. Think about all of the European traders. They were all trying to get to India. The discovery of your country and my country, America and Canada, came because they were trying to find the way to India. So India was the source of all spices, and back in the day, food, you want spices. Food's probably very bland. The food doesn't, you know, nowadays people are relying so much on globalism. We import so many things. Like even in Japan, I love the avocado. Doesn't grow in Japan. I mean, there are avocado farms here, but it's expensive to eat Japanese avocados. 10 times the price. Mexican avocado, bring it over here. So we've always been wanting something from somewhere else, right? And everybody's consuming something from somewhere else. Our clothing, how many miles did each of our pieces of clothing make before it got to our own body? So India, because of its diversity, again, in the geography, in the forests, it had the most diverse level of plants, herbs, and spices. It had the most diversity in language, culture, music, and it had the most diversity in terms of resources. So everybody wanted to trade with them. That's why the Silk Road back in the day was made, right? From Japan to Europe. They were mostly moving Indian goods.
India to Europe. You said Japan.
Well, yeah, it started in Japan.
Oh, it started in Japan?
Well, yeah, the Silk Route technically goes from Japan. It's called the Silk Route because they were moving Japanese silk from Japanese silk all the way through.
I thought it went to China. I didn't know it went to Japan.
Well, there was, it went through China, but they were bringing Japanese silk. I think they were bringing it through to China.
Okay.
Yeah, those trades started like that. Yeah. So, but it's all about the movement of the Indian resources around, right? And then all the ancient religions, like even in China, you have the story, the Journey to the West, which is the story of a monk who's going to India to bring back scriptures back to China. And they have the famous monkey, you know, Song Wukong. My Chinese students used to call me Song Wukong because I was hairy like this.
You look like a monkey. You kind of look monkeyish.
Little monkeyish, little Hanuman. In India, they call him Hanuman. And he's like a super powerful monkey. And, you know, it's a very famous story.
Yeah, yeah.
Journey to the West. And, yeah, so back in the day, even in Japan, we have all these beautiful Japanese gods here. They're all based on Indian gods. Not the original. The very, very original Shintoism is a little different. But the Buddhist influence is all coming from India.
Yeah, Buddhism spread all over the East. So in a way, you're kind of what you're doing by bringing this Indian tradition to Japan. You're kind of in this tradition that's happened before when Buddhism went to China and went to Japan.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in that lineage.
Yeah, for sure, in that way. And you know, I think part of the reason why even now it's still attractive. The Indian systems are all attractive. You know, for example, the Hare Krishna book distribution is the biggest book distributor in the world. You know, the whole world. They distribute books around the whole international sphere or flat sphere, whatever you believe.
That's a topic.
That's a different topic for another show. But they are number one in the world for spreading books around the world. And so all they're doing is spreading the good thing, good knowledge, good science that works, science that changes lives, that allows people to understand what this life is, who they really are. And I think part of the reason why it's attractive and why I'm attracted to it too is it's the most complete system. I mean, Islam is also very great, and Christianity is great, Judaism is great. All these religions are great, but they've all been corrupted a lot. And also because of the influence of military and so much warfare going on, many traditions cut down, gutted. So many countries have been, like even China, you can't really, it's all been taken over by, the modern way it is. The only remnants of the ancient Chinese culture are now in Taiwan, which is also under threat. But I lived in China for many years, and I was hoping to find something of traditional Chinese culture there. It's very hard to find.
Yeah, apparently you have to kind of go to the mountains and find the
there are
living,
still sages and hermits, and there are still sages and hermits. And
yeah, the communist thing kind of wiped out their culture.
Yeah. That's also another topic, and that's a big topic, the Chinese topic. And now, like the news in China now is about the protests, about the really strict COVID rules, COVID laws, and the people are starting to actually finally stand up against the government.
Yeah. Before they would be too scared to protest because then they would just get arrested and disappeared or thrown in jail. But now maybe there's enough of them that are like realizing like we're all mad about this. So if we all protest together, they can't arrest us all. Which another thing, you being Canadian, I saw where Trudeau, your prime minister, he was supporting the Chinese protesters, but when the Canadians protested against lockdowns, he froze their bank accounts and tried to clear them out. So it's interesting, the hypocrisy there.
Yeah. In this way, my country, Canada, or at least the country I was born to, it has it's full of problems. Like everywhere, every government is corrupt.
Yeah.
And you can find that everywhere. But in this way, I'm very happy to be living here in Japan, where it's, especially in the countryside, very peaceful. We don't need to really worry about anything.
Yeah.
Really. We have it fairly low-key here.
Yeah, and then talking about what's happening in China right now, that brings us to maybe the other main topic that we're going to talk about on the show is current events, things going on in the world, because, you're really into the whole yoga and the Vedic thing, but the point is it's really relevant for the world today because there's so much crazy things going on. People are, with technology, with corrupt governments, people are searching for meaning. People are more unhealthy than ever, physically, mentally, spiritually. So what you're building with this ashram and your yoga school, you're really working on providing an alternative way of living that isn't part of this insane modern world. We talked earlier about Kali Yuga. Maybe we're in Kali Yuga where just everything, this dark age sort of
Mm-hmm.
degeneracy.
Yep.
And what you're doing, you're working on the body physically, the mind, building community, all these things.
Yeah. So the human organism, what we are, we are physical body. So the physical health is very important. And this is overlooked a lot. There are many traditions, spiritual traditions, that overlook the importance of the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. As you know, in the Western world, people are predominantly addicted to drugs. In your country, America, it's a huge obesity crisis. All around the world, there's lots of these, problems, and mostly because people just don't know how to live in their body in a great way. So, Japan has in terms of diet, Japan has a special programming from their, I don't know where it comes from. It's a yoga kind of teaching, though. They say hara hachibu. You know that one?
Yep.
That's
60%?
No, 80.
80%.
Hachi is 80%. You shouldn't eat more than 80% of your stomach capacity. Now, in terms of yoga, we say usually 50%, but 80% is still excellent. And if you look in Japan, there's almost no obesity going on. It's very low, very low amount of people are actually overweight. And because people have smaller portions, they consume less food. They don't want to stuff themselves every time. And this is a very big part of physical well-being. Actually, I would say predominantly most of our health and our feeling in our physical body has to do with our diet.
You are what you eat.
Yeah. It's true. Because what do we spend our time doing? Most of the time we're putting something in our mouth at some time. People are planning their next meal while they're eating their current meal. What are we going to have for dinner while you're eating your breakfast?
Yeah.
Right? So controlling of diet is a basic part. So physical starts with the diet, what you eat. Of course, in this tradition, we are vegetarian. We try not to consume any meat. But the consumption of any food to excess is always going to lead to trouble, right? Especially nowadays. And it's so funny how we can have people who are incredibly overweight, and we can still have people in the world who are starving. This is amazing to me.
Or, there's a new problem now where in very poor areas where people are poor, they're obese because they're eating like junk food, And so, that's another interesting thing is the quality of our food has really declined. And even if you might be eating like fruits or vegetables, the quality of those may have declined recently because of the soil being depleted of essential nutrients.
You've mentioned this earlier, the soil depletion. Yeah, that's again agricultural practices. With the advent of the nitrogen fertilizers, they were able to make plants grow in incredible volume, but it depletes the soil a lot.
Which, I was just thinking that this mindset that led to that practice of like, I don't care about the future, I don't care about the consequences, all I care about is right now, make money, get more yield, and that's present in our food, it's present in every aspect of our society, really, where people have just been so unconscious, I guess. It's like not aware of what you're doing, that you're poisoning yourself just for a temporary high or a temporary benefit.
Knowing the origin of your food, I think it's a pretty important thing. Most of us, and myself included, like we mostly get most of our food from grocery store, I guess. We have a local farmer that delivers to us, but that's not all of what we eat. And nowadays, because of none of us are doing this really, I think, on purpose, because we just kind of inherited the system, right? We kind of came into it, and then we just do whatever is being done, and we just continue. But we don't really have an idea of the farmers that made the food, or no farmer actually made the food. The farmers that grew the food, and what they did, what were they thinking, and that process from the seed to our plate. What does that process look like? And then not only that, but what actually is inside the food. They say that a mikan, one of those mandarin oranges, today, 100 years ago, the nutritional equivalency to today is about 1 to 50.
Really?
Yeah. So like one orange back in the day was enough as like taking 50 of those oranges.
Wow.
So maybe that's a blown out number, but I do know it's out of proportion. Even if it's 1 to 5, that's too much.
Yeah.
Even if it's 1 to 2, what's going on? Only in 100 years, right? And so 100 years, that's like when all those fertilizers became prominent. And then nowadays also, I notice when I'm in the farm, I still find, if I'm digging, I still find layers of plastic. I don't know what it's like in other countries because I've only really done farming in this country, but I know it's the same in other countries that they have a practice of putting plastic over the earth as a kind of mulch. And yeah, it keeps the moisture of the soil in there, but the plastic eventually, they should take it off, but they don't always. And the soil ends up with layers and layers of plastic in it. And I'm sure that that's also a big problem internationally around the world everywhere. Quality of food is hard because we have so many people. So do you focus on feeding people, satisfying their stomach discomfort, or do you focus on nourishing them and then them still being hungry? Our stomachs are all stretched for sure. I think about 200, 300, 400, 1,000 years ago, what were the people eating? What was the quantity? They probably didn't eat so much. And they probably maybe they suffered with hunger, or maybe they had better techniques to distract themselves from hunger, or I don't know.
I think a lot of people nowadays they eat out of more emotional need and addiction and things like this, which maybe in older times people were more simple, people were more present in their bodies, they worked outside a lot. It was just everything was just much more natural. But I think a lot of the problems today is people's emotions, and this is where, we were talking about kind of physical, about what we eat, how much the emotions and the mind affect our physicality, and it's all connected, really.
Totally. Absolutely. If you don't get enough sleep, easy to be grumpy. If you eat a lot of food, it's hard to focus. Mind is sleepy and lethargic. If you're hungry, it's easy to focus. It's like your body goes into hypervigilance. And so that's why every day I try to do 16 to 18 hours of fasting before I eat any food. Yeah. And I'll eat 1 or 2 meals a day, no problem. Stuff my face when the time comes. But for the majority of the day, try to be hungry. And, just drink some tea or drink some water and just try to keep yourself not going crazy for as long as possible until you absolutely have to eat. And then also by that time, when I have my breakfast, usually between noon and 2 o'clock, I feel, okay, now I finally earned my meal. I did my morning practice. I did some work in the farm. I did some construction. I did something. I had some output. And then I'm ready then I deserve to get food. So I kind of treat myself a little bit like a slave in that sense. I don't just satisfy myself so easily. I try to hold it back, give myself a little bit of austerity. And some people will say, oh, you're too extreme.
Not even close
Not
to
even
what some people do.
Not even close to the potential of things. People say they're starving and they haven't eaten in 5 hours. Like, we should understand, what the words we use actually mean, right? Because if you say you're starving and you had breakfast, then you're really treating the people who are actually starving with great disrespect, actually. So, but this is all understanding the relationship between the consciousness and the body, and then also how it works. What is that relationship, and how can we get deeper into that relationship? If you live with someone, you learn from each other's habits, from each other's behaviors. You learn how to live together. Oh, I can do this around them. I can't do this around them, and it makes life more easy. If you're like me, you're a little stubborn. Sometimes you like to poke a little. That's a problem. But for myself, anyway, it's because I think the reason I have that poking tendency sometimes is I do that with myself. Yeah.
To prompt them into evolving or something.
Yeah. Just I prompt myself into don't be too satisfied with just being convenient and relaxing too much. Because I'm gonna die one day. We're all gonna die one day. So the big rest will come, if you believe that. One day your body will be inactive. Totally and completely. So if you really, really, really need to rest, just wait for that time. And anyway, there's always nighttime. You can sleep. Sleep is very important.
Yeah. So I think Or I mean, we could do a whole show or many shows on this topic of health and diet,
Yeah.
and which
We will.
I think we will. Yeah, I wanted to also get back to though. I think, as I kind of mentioned this before, that with everything going on in the world, more and more people, I think, especially since 2020 with COVID, more and more people are realizing like, I don't want to live in a city anymore because I could get locked down and then I don't have access to maybe fresh food or. You know, people are more and more not trusting government to provide for them or the healthcare industry to keep them healthy, all these things. So I think what you're doing with the ashram is it's kind of everything, you know, it's food, it's community, it's yoga, it's spirituality, many other things, you know, people there want to create music, want to create things. So it's like, I think more and more people, I'm seeing it, are having this realization that like, oh, I think I want to move to the countryside. I want to work with my local community. I want to stop putting my trust and my power in these huge companies or big governments, and you know, get more to a local approach, which I think. So I think what you're doing is kind of like ahead of the curve.
Yeah, you know, cities are expensive. Countryside is usually a little cheaper, right? Well, at least in Japan it is.
Usually a lot cheaper.
Usually a lot cheaper. And, of course, the culture is less, right? The reason people like to live in cities is because they have easy access to a show. Entertainment. And they have easy access to other people. So many different people. So if you're someone that feels like lonely, then you can find someone who's like-minded around you very quickly. But ultimately, human beings, I think our job is to be like stewards of the earth. And we're supposed to be somehow connected to the earth itself, to the environment. And if you're living in a city, you don't really ever even, like, half the time you're walking in shoes over concrete, you never actually get to feel real earth.
You're disconnected from...
Yeah, or you're sitting in your apartment like 20 floors up, and, you know, you're not even touching the ground. So, yeah, nature, we love nature, looking at nature, being in the forest, fresh air. Breathing, not sitting in a room with all the windows closed. You know, having even in the wintertime, I'll sleep with the window cracked, little or a lot, depending how I feel, much to the chagrin of my wife and kids. But we all get warm eventually, and we feel nice and sleep soundly because of the fresh air. So all of these things are things that the human body needs to be maximum healthy.
Yeah, and it's only in the past 100 years or a few hundred years that we've gotten so divorced from nature, from ourselves, and that's why there's so much insanity in the world and disease.
Yeah,
dis-ease.
Dis-ease. So much dis-ease, yes.
And what was I going to say?
The divorce of nature.
Before that, but
so the divorce from nature is interesting because, you know, there's also a push for us to go more into space and things like this. It's like that's like the ultimate divorce from Earth. It's like actually like surrounding ourselves in our own 100% man-made objects and then blasting ourselves away from the Mother Earth completely and totally. That's like the ultimate divorce. That's like that's a total relocation.
Could be. I mean, in a way, no matter where you go, you're in nature.
Yeah.
And even in outer space, you can create a natural environment on Mars or something.
Maybe.
Or you can find other planets that are just like Earth, that are abundant with
maybe, yeah,
with
it's
life
possible.
And oxygen and all that.
It's possible. I've always felt like we should. There's always a point to that. When I was a kid, of course, I always say I was a Star Trek kid. I had the dreams of space and aliens and United Federations and all of these kind of things. But as I'm living and longer, I see that, you know, we need to definitely, it's okay to have those thoughts and ideas, and no problem, we can pursue those goals. But ultimately, we need to understand who we are, or what we are. And maybe that's like going and exploring is a way to find yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
But also I found that, and also in terms of spirituality, when you sit still, when you look inside, when you stay on the earth, when you actually put your hands on the earth, you can understand, what is my body? It comes from this earth. You know, it's made of this earth. Actually, our bodies are just made of like, if we eat food and that food becomes our body, right? We transform like an orange or a pear into a human body. Then when our mother is growing us, it's actually just the earth growing our bodies. So we're actually from the earth. So understanding part of what this body is and the proper relationship is understanding what the earth is.
Yeah. So yeah, in that way, like if you explore into outer space, you can also go inside to go outside. It's kind of paradoxical or something, but the deeper you connect to the earth, the deeper you connect to the universe.
Yeah.
Also, because you're saying that everything that we eat becomes our bodies.
Yeah.
That's all originally sunlight.
Yes.
Sunlight converted into plants, converted into fruit, converted into.
Absolutely.
So it's like you can trace it all the way back to the sun. So yeah. But back to your previous point, I think you were kind of saying, like, should we be exploring space when we have so much to fix on Earth, right? Is that kind of what you were saying?
That's one of the arguments that people say.
Which I believe that it's important to have that exploring, to have that vision of the future.
The frontier.
To keep
The frontier,
You know, some people would say we shouldn't be doing anything in space with, Elon Musk or NASA because we need to stop climate change or pollution and things like that. I think we can do both. Like we can't.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said continue to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you.
Yeah, continue to do that. But also, we should also have efforts. Like, no problem. We can pursue those things. I still have a part of me that likes the idea of all those things. But, ultimately also, each one of us, we're responsible for our little life we have, right? And a lot of the goals, these kind of goals of going out into space, these are goals that will only really be reach their fruition after like 100 years. Like maybe to terraform Mars, that's not a quick thing. To make a colony in another, that's not a quick thing. But each person ultimately has to fundamentally be responsible for their own life and what they do. And so no problem. We can explore those things, but we should also understand what is Earth, what are people, what is this?
Yeah, we have so much more to learn about where we are now. The
frontier is always there. The human beings will always go for frontier. We'll always push the frontier. The new world, the newest world, the newer world. Keep on going, keep on going. I think that we'll never be able to stop that.
Yeah.
As long as there's people, we'll always have some desire to explore out more, and explore down in the ocean more.
Yeah, I think there's so much about our Earth and human beings that, like, what humans know is only 1% of, what's actually here. Because we've been so focused in the physical world, we don't perceive that maybe the extraterrestrials are already here. They're already around us and waiting for us to wake up, And you could get into all sorts of different Earth mysteries and things hidden under dirt, under the ocean.
Inside consciousness.
Inside consciousness, yeah.
Inside our own consciousness, right? From one perspective, if you actually understand this consciousness, that maybe you can explore the whole universe without actually having to walk outside the door. Maybe we're too stuck, like you said, to the material.
Yeah, I mean, going back to these Indian sages, how did they know all these things that they knew without, traveling into space? But they knew things about the stars. They knew, which I would say they discovered through meditation, through consciousness.
Yeah.
There's so many things that the ancients understood that we're just now understanding through our modern science and technology. And I think in our world today, many people put so much emphasis on technology and science as like that's the only way that we're going to be able to do things or discover things or know things. But there's so much that can be discovered and known through consciousness, through the inner realm.
I think that it is science.
Yeah.
It is science. It's just the modern institution of science has not accepted those things so much. I mean, some have, but there is a whole science that they're kind of disconnected from. If they connect to it, then it'll be total unification of our knowledge. And that's a step that I think that a lot of people are pushing that step. And there must be. I hope there is. I know that there's always stories of that. But the exploration of the inner world and the outer world is something that we have to do simultaneously in that sense.
Yeah, it's only in our modern world that we've split off science and spirituality. or astrology and astronomy, alchemy and chemistry,
Yeah.
physics and metaphysics. But in ancient India and places like that, they understood that it's all one thing. You don't separate. Like science just means to know.
Like how, we talk about the ancient people. We talked about the pyramids, how amazing they are to get built. But in India also, there's amazing temples that are beyond our understanding of how they constructed. They have structures that were like carved out of mountains that I don't think we could do so well even today. So there's definitely an understanding of technology and the workings of the elements in the natural world that we don't understand and haven't grasped. I'm not sure, this is another topic for another podcast too, but alternative branches of technology, like how we developed techniques that are different from what we know now. Constructing the ashram, I've become very familiar with our method of construction and plumbing and electricity, and then how we build things and using the tools. But how do they make the pyramids? They didn't have table saws and cranes and
nobody's still able to explain exactly how they were able to cut those blocks so precisely, how they were able to move those blocks. And apparently a team of Japanese engineers recently, 10, 20 years ago, they tried to build the pyramids but in a smaller scale, and they couldn't do it with modern technology. And these are Japanese engineers, which,
pretty good.
Those are some of the best in the world. So it's like a lot of mainstream archaeologists want to say, the slaves did it and they moved them down the Nile or something, but it's just there's so much that is unexplained about how that could have been possible with their relatively primitive technology, without which I believe that they were using consciousness technology, possibly sound to levitate the blocks. Or
yeah, I would guess it would be something to do with that, something to do with sound. And even the stories of ancient Tibet, not even ancient Tibet, but some of the early stories of people who went to Tibet, they said that they experienced people levitating stones and stuff using their big horns and chanting together simultaneously.
Yeah. I've heard stories about that too, that it's not even that long ago that people have witnessed that happening with these Tibetan lamas.
And then there's that one guy, what's his name, from the coral...
Oh, in Florida.
In Florida, yeah. He was moving multi-ton stones by himself with just a stick with a rope on it. And he said his only thing he said was that he figured out the techniques the Egyptians used.
Yeah.
And
he said it was something to do with vibration and sound, and it's I think obviously our mainstream science, they could really look into this and experiment and do it, but I think this is where we get into conspiracy territory.
Yes,
I believe that
they already have it, they already know about it,
Yeah.
and they're purposely not letting us know about it so they can
Yeah.
exploit the ignorant masses in some way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, this is a big topic, man. This is the tip of the iceberg.
So this is the show number 1 on your birthday.
On my birthday.
Birthday of the podcast. Birthday of Waylon. We've kind of done a review, an overview of many different things we'll talk about. In this show.
Yes. We covered a lot of topics
today. A
today.
Taster, a little sampler.
Platter. Yeah, little all you can eat platter. Exactly.
And we're going to have other guests, other English-speaking guests.
Yeah, whoever we can get around us. We always are interested. We're going to bring people in who have totally different perspectives. I'm not just wanting to focus just on one point all the time. I really do like to have the different perspectives on things, and hopefully one of these episodes will bring Pablo in, who's got more colorful language and things like this. But the perspectives of every person, I think, is important, and the experiences from people, and that's part of that's part of the reason why I'm attracted also to the Indian culture, is that it's very pluralistic. It's open. It has so many different languages and religions, and it can work because they're accepting of everybody. Different political beliefs, no problem. Different religious beliefs, no problem. Different behaviors, habits, no problem. We can find a common ground together, and we can learn how to live together.
It's just interesting how you that's your style too. That's why you're so attracted to the Indian things, because you're so like that chaos, but creative chaos of anything. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
And,
Because what else? What else to do? The more, like, if we cut ourselves off, like, one thing my father always taught me was to stay open. And yeah, I'm rigid in a lot of ways. When it comes to my own self-discipline, you have to be rigid if you want to achieve certain levels of integrity and also prosperity. Also, the discipline, without discipline, it's impossible, to make even this house, this 80-year-old kominka, old Japanese house. It required a lot of discipline because all of these pieces of wood are notched. They didn't use very little nails. They notched out every piece of wood so it could fit together perfectly. So that requires a huge amount of focus, a huge amount of discipline to be able to do. So anything successful, any endeavor successful, whether it be material or spiritual, financial, whatever, it requires discipline. So we have to have some rigidity somewhere. And then for me, that rigidity is more in my own self-discipline. And then for my mind and my heart, be open to people and let everything come. And in the avenue, in the marketplace of ideas, we find out which ideas work the best, which practices and which ways are the best.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act to be flexible but disciplined.
It's not easy, yeah. And every day is different. And so the discipline has to also be somehow adjustable, but also the same. And so I always remember Krishna. He talked about in the Bhagavad Gita that he taught his yoga to the sun. And the sun was the one who taught the first man, the first woman, Manu. The sun is always regular, always on time. It's very regular. So we can learn from the sun in this way, how to be steady. And so that's why the end of every show I wanted to talk about the Vishnu Sahasranam, which is the 1,008. Hopefully we make 1,008 episodes. And so the first episode, the first name of Vishnu is Vishva, which Vish comes from root, and also means like kind of the root of all, the absolute root of all, or the substrate, like I talked about. The source, yeah. And the thing, and so it's kind of like the root. If this is a big tree of life, and we're all part of it, there is a single root. Right? Like recently, I found out that on the earth there was two primary roots of life, and one was the plants, and one was the fungus. And we actually come from the fungal root, because actually mammalian DNA is closer to fungus than it is to plant. That's why mushrooms are very meaty when you chew them. So Vishva being, this is the names of Vishnu, 1,008 names of Vishnu. The root, so we say in Sanskrit that the Westerners, not the Westerners, but at least the Western materialist thinks that consciousness arises out of matter. But we would say in yoga, or the different way of thinking about it, is that matter arises out of consciousness. So there's a base consciousness, a root of everything, and everything arises out of that. So understanding that root is part of what I really believe that the human life is about, is that we have our external material experience through our senses, but there is something which is rooted behind our senses, which is providing for the experience to occur. And one of our jobs as a human life is to find out what that is. Because like an animal is different than us, but the same. They can also eat, and they can also sleep, and they can also reproduce, have sex. They can also protect, just like we do. So if we only live and think the point of life is in that realm, it relates us to animals in a sense. But clearly as human beings, there's something different about us. So understanding that difference is to understand that there might be a higher purpose, there might be a higher experience that's available to us if we choose to pursue it. So part of that pursuit is to understand what is that root, the root of our life, the root of our consciousness, the root of the whole universe. What is that root, and how can we bring ourselves back to that root? And then, and understanding that root, we understand who we are and our proper position. And then in this way, we have a lot more peace of mind. We have way less stress. If we know who we are, if we know our position, then life is very clear, and there's no more confusion. But as long as we are ignorant, of our root. We're ignorant of our position. We're ignorant of our place. Things will always be confusing for us. We'll always be chasing our own tail. We'll always be in a little bit of misery, second guessing everything. Should I do this or should I do that? Or is this best for me or is this best for me? We fight against our destiny in this sense.
Yeah, this reminds me of, they say the etymology of the word religion is to link back.
Yeah.
So
Ligament, like attachment. Yeah.
So it's, similar idea that that's what spirituality is all about, is getting back to the source and not being distracted by the illusion of the form, the mind,
appearance.
the appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of the 1,008 names of Vishnu.
It's the first one.
Very first one.
The very first one. Vishva.
Vishva.
Yeah. Okay. Vishva. And we'll do more. Every episode I wish to do one. And we can talk about it.
Yeah. And one other thing, you said that today is kind of the birthday or the...
of the Bhagavad Gita, yeah. As well as being my birthday, the old lunar calendar lines up today with my birthday as being the advent of the Bhagavad Gita. And so the Bhagavad Gita is the song of God, Bhagavan. This is the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, God and the devotee, the friend of God. And basically, the Bhagavad Gita is considered to be itihasa, which is historical text. Now, there's a lot of myth attached to it, or stories and fantasies, but basically it's considered to be a history of the kingdoms of the ancient Varnashram society, the Dharmic society, where this is the dawn of the Kali Yuga. Just when finally the trustworthiness or the integrity of the rulers was compromised. The corruption had started at the beginning, some many thousands and thousands of years ago. But by the time it got to the Bhagavad Gita, this means that the hierarchy, the rulers, the kings, they all started to become corrupt and they started to become very bad. And so the Bhagavad Gita is within the Mahabharata, which is a great epic story, which is about this transition into the corruption of all of the rulers. And in this time, there's a big war in a family where Arjuna has to fight his brethren, has to kill them in the name of goodness, dharma, and he has doubts, and he fighting himself. I shouldn't do this. This is not good. He got to the point where he was about to fight them. They're on the battlefield, literally. And so at this point, Krishna gives him satsang. He gives him a direct kata, a direct discussion about why, yes, you're in a bad position, but you have to do this job. You are a warrior. You are whoever you are in life. Life is a war. The first battle is waking up.
Yeah. So this is sort of a metaphor for our lives, that we're in this battle. And it's our duty not to run away and hide.
Don't run away and hide. Don't go against your nature. Do what you came to do. Do what your destiny is. Follow through with it. And face that every day, every moment. And how to do? You remember Krishna. You remember God. All the time. He always says this. Remember me and fight. Remember me and fight. All the time. Remember me and fight. Don't stop. Bhagavad Gita is this day, 5,000 years ago? Or 6,000 years ago? This is when the advent of the Bhagavad
This is
Gita
when it was
is.
finished or released? Or
I have to double check it, but I think it's the advent of the Bhagavad Gita. That's the official title. So that means, I guess, it was the first incarnation of it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's interesting about the greater context, which I didn't really know, that you said how the rulers had become very corrupt.
Yes.
It's like, it seems very similar to what we're finding out in today's world, that, we people are waking up to realizing that we can't trust our rulers. Like,
But the thing is that in Kali Yuga, the rulers are already all corrupt. And then what we're witnessing now is the degradation of the final caste, the final level of integrity, which is the Vaishya, which is the merchant, or the businessman, or what we're witnessing now is the degeneration of that institution. So at the very beginning was the Sati Yuga, where it was the degeneration of the priestly caste. Yeah, and then it broke.
Even in Satya Yuga, the golden age,
Well, that was kind of perfect.
the degradation of the.
That was the golden age when everything was pretty perfect. As it moved into the second age,
Oh, okay.
that's when
So
the
they
degeneration started.
They say the priests degenerate first, then the
Yeah.
rulers, then the merchants.
Yeah, then the merchants. Yeah,
Then
and then
else.
from there, it's all everything's flat. Society becomes flat, and everything corruption is everywhere, and there's no authority that can be trusted. So right now we're experiencing that maybe the last hopes for humanity exist in the strong businessman who actually has morals and character. There might still be some of those around. There might still be some business endeavors or some organizations where there's still goodness there and integrity. And what we will see through our lifetimes and the generations that follow is the degeneration of this institution. As yeah.
I think the hope now is not in business people. It's just in individuals and local communities.
Yeah.
You know, like the ashram, like just
Yeah.
people creating a new way of doing things that's local,
Yeah.
community oriented.
The thing is like you say it's new, but I don't think this way that I'm choosing is very new. It's very old, I really believe. It's
New in the sense that people are rediscovering that
Yeah.
this is the right way to live, and that people are dropping out of the cities and the big companies and things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people move into this countryside area and tried to figure out how to do. It's a hard transition to try and figure out how do we survive in this capitalistic world, but how do we also work together in a way that we never have? How can we do it all? So it's all a learning curve for everybody, myself included. And, you said before I'm kind of the nucleus of it, but my goal is never to be a leader of anything. It's, a real leader is all about positions. Some people lead in this, some people lead in this, and we have to learn how to move the power around, because if the power gets too concentrated in one area, unless one is enlightened, unless one is perfectly integral in everything, ultimately corruption comes from any kind of concentration of power. You saw that with degenerations of corporations, and like you talked about the cryptocurrency thing and everything, things degenerate. Yeah. And that's just because, again, if the human doesn't have connection to their root, they won't be able to have the foundation necessary to resist temptation, to resist the corruption from coming in. It's only when we have connection to our root that we really have the integrity to stand up to the bewildering nature of the world, and then the bewildering nature of our own mind and our own desires, and how they stray us from. We have a goal, we make a goal, but then we stray, and because of that straying, our desire for this, a desire for that, our goal becomes faded, it becomes unclear, and eventually it collapses because we don't have the follow through.
Sounds like this idea of the root is kind of a thread throughout the whole conversation we just had, where you were talking about the bamboo roots, how
Yes.
they're all connected, and then going over this
Interesting.
the name of Vishnu, and we talked about many things, but and this is the first episode. This is the root episode of the show, which hopefully
we can continue
many episodes. And we'll be able to keep updating people on the ashram and how things are going there. And
Yeah, we'll try to continue as much as we can. It would be nice to do once a week, but we'll see how fast we can do it. And then even our location and our background and our music and everything, it'll all change. But basically it's going to be the same thing. Us talking like this, exploring these topics, and then let's see what news comes in the next while.
So probably for next show, we'll have a main topic we'll talk about, and just see where it goes.
Try to get a few more mics in here and talk a little bit more. It'd be nice.
All right.
Yeah. So.
You ready to close this out?
Yeah, we can say thank you, Seth. Good. Very good, everybody. Thank you for anybody who's watching. Thank you very much.
Watching or listening.
Watching or listening, yes. We will continue for as long as we...
We'll keep talking even if nobody's listening.
Even if nobody's listening. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, as long as we can. So,
all right.
Hari Om.
Shanthitown.